Hey everyone, welcome back to the Gray Matters podcast. I'm your host, Josh Perry.
And I'm the other host, Jackie Lauricella.
She's not the other host, she's also a host. We host this together. And Jackie is a little fearful of sharing her story, but that's all we're going to do today on this episode is she doesn't like talking about herself, she says. That's how she worded it earlier. But this episode is all things Jackie. We're going to dive right into it. And so I'm going to lead the conversation I'm going to lead the questions, and she's going to talk and fill you in on the context of her journey and how we connected and how we ended up here today. So first things first, let us get a little bio of you. You know, your name, what you do, what you're passionate about, just a broad look at who Jackie is today, and then we'll back up.
Okay. My name is Jacqueline Lauricella, and people usually call me Jack or Jackie. Currently, I am an athletic trainer, which is a medical professional that is normally within the sports medicine community, but we've been branching out a little bit lately. But we do prehabilitation, we do injury prevention, exercise, emergency care, rehab, taping, bracing, and also treatment of injuries and chronic issues and things like that. I work at Durham Academy in Durham, North Carolina, and it's beautiful there and such an inclusive, loving community. I love it, and I also do some PRN or as-needed work with like NCFC soccer and Bare Essential Sports Medicine with TaeKwonDo and BMX events.
So tell us where you're from. Where'd you grow up?
I'm originally from, we always say Daytona Beach. I was just talking to some friends about this. We say Daytona Beach because nobody knows what Port Orange is. But essentially, I was born in that area. Port Orange is 5 or 10 minutes mainland of Daytona. Got all the way through 18 years of life there with my wonderful parents, Todd and Elizabeth Lauricella. They are still married. They will be married for over 35 years this September. It's got to be 38 years now. It's crazy. Went to high school. What?
Well, we'll get into that. So your parents, obviously, I know them. They're amazing. They're funny in their own unique ways. They're supportive. Because they're both different. They both have their own sense of personality. Your dad's more dry and blunt. Your mom is more blunt and outgoing-ish. Yeah. If that's the most simplistic way I can form it.
Yeah. They're both weirdos, which is where I get a lot of my weirdness from. So I appreciate them for that.
But they're also hustlers. They're hard workers. Your dad's run his own business for how many years now?
Since I was probably 7 or 8, so
good 20 years now.
Really long time, yeah.
Your mom branched out into doing her own real estate photography, hustling that.
My mom's a little eclectic fairy, just running around doing all sorts of business things. She didn't graduate high school. She got her GED.
Yay, GEDs! Yeah. I forgot to mention that in my episode. I got my GED 4 years after dropping out.
Hey, it's not about you right now, so
it's about you. You're talking about your mom now. Your mom and I share a lot of similar.
Yeah, you guys are the same person. It's super weird. So she got her GED and then learned how to do some accounting work. I don't know if she's a CPA or not. I can't remember, but she does taxes for different businesses. She helps my dad run his business. She managed a gift shop, restaurant, ice cream parlor combo thing in South Daytona. She ran that and did all the special events for them. Then she kind of left that because she did have experience before that too with another restaurant. Left that, helped my dad out, stayed at home, did her own thing, did taxes, almost what is it called when she was contracted out by different companies to do taxes. And then it was actually really funny. I raised a lot of money for myself when I was about 14 because I really loved taking photos, and I was I'm going to buy myself a nice camera. And one thing I really love about my parents is that as loving and supportive as they are and as spoiled as I was being an only child and having all of their love and attention directed at me, when I wanted something that was like expensive or out of their price range, it was very much like get it yourself. So I saved up my own money and I bought myself a Canon digital Rebel SLR camera, and I was so stoked on it and I loved it so much, and I had it for a few years and I took it with me everywhere on my travels. And I remember when we went to go do my senior portraits in high school, my mom looked at the prices of what they were and she was like, no. And like we went out and we took my digital Rebel and she took my senior portraits and they turned out so good. And other people saw them in my class and they were like, these are really good. Who did these? And I was like, my mom. Like, my mom took my pictures and turned out great. And so that kind of like stemmed this crazy thing. And she just kept going, and now she's got like nicer equipment than I have, and she became a photographer, and now she's done weddings, and she really loves to do infant portraits, and now she does like real estate photography, and she's like hustling doing that now. So it's crazy. It's really funny how that turned out. But she's always been like a creative person. She also did like books and finances for a professional oil painter too, like ran all his numbers, and he used to teach classes and everything, and she like took up oil painting for a little while. But she can also like tile a house and install surround sound stereos and wire them through the walls and stuff like that. So I feel like anything she like kind of tries to learn, she gets it fairly quickly.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see how each of them have instilled their own ways in you, and how you've been your little hybrid of them, which is what we all are from our parents. So it's pretty cool. And I want to go back to the, your upbringing and what that was like with such a supportive family, but also, who were you then? Like, what were your interests? What did you want to become? Nutrition and fitness are a big part of our life today. Yeah. So what was it like, your first 15 years or so growing up, your perspective on life, what you wanted to be, and how did, exercise, nutrition play a role in that?
It's so crazy. That's such a loaded question, but I got it. So my family on my father's side is Sicilian. We are Italian, and technically my parents met when they were teenagers, and both my grandparents lived on the same street. So that's how they met when they were younger. So my dad has known my mom since he was 19 and she was 14. They didn't get together until like 5 years later, but like that's how they met, and they hung out and stuff like that. And we developed really close family friends that kind of lived in the area. So I was really fortunate growing up, at least for the first 8 years, that I had my entire family within 5 miles of each other, not even. And it was in this little, beach town, and we got to see each other all the time. And when I was about 8, my aunt moved away, and my grandparents followed suit, and they moved back up north, actually, to Massachusetts, to Shelburne Falls and Springfield, Mass, and all that. And a couple of my cousins moved back up to North Carolina with their mom and everything. So things kind of got split up a little bit, but at the same time, we had this like huge extended family, and I've grown up with them as my family. And like the Leones, which is like funny, of course, they would befriend like the only other Italian family on the block. They've been a huge part of my life, and I would consider them my family. Like I wouldn't hesitate to call them and ask them for anything that I needed. And the Uzzles, who were a huge part of that. So I've always had this like really incredible, like massive support system that I think plays a huge role in who I am as a person and how I want to help support other people. Like I always have, when I believe in someone and I love someone, I just want to support them so much because I know how much of that it's helped me.
It's like a traditional
in the past.
Non-American Italian supportive community.
Right.
It's culture. Like that's just the culture. It's a community.
It's just we were just like raised around that, and it was like, oh, if I like mouthed off to my mom, of course I got in trouble and everything, but if like I came home from the Leones or the Uzzles, like, and my parents heard that I had like mouthed off or they had to correct me or something, there was just serious hell to pay. Like I was, when I hear the term like, oh, it takes a village to raise a child, like I'm just like, of course it does. Like I had such a good village. It was amazing.
So what were your young Jackie aspirations and dreams? Like, who did you want to become, or what did you want to do with your life as you're growing up and becoming a teenager, before we'll get into your sports background and the medicine background?
Oh, I feel like when I was younger, I wanted to do so many different things. Like, I say I was all over the place, but I was fortunate enough to know what I wanted to do at a really young age. So when I was 14, that's when I decided I want to be an athletic trainer. And it was because my athletic trainer, Trish Beargrounds, I kind of saw her spring into action at a sporting event that I used to do. And
let's talk about that first. What was the sport you became passionate about?
Okay, so...
And how did that begin? Because there's a funny story with that.
Yeah, okay, so I was an aggressive child. I'm not sure. I'm not sure where it came from. My parents are very kind people. But I was aggressive and I had some anger issues and stuff like that. I know, but I was like 7. Like, I'm talking about like little kid. Like, I didn't have brothers or sisters to fight with, but oh my gosh, like the Leons and stuff like that. Like, I can remember getting into physical altercations with my best friend Jessie all the time. And I was just aggressive. And I remember there were incidences on the playground at this like private school that I went to, a little elementary school, of like a kid called me a name. I didn't even know what it meant at the time, but like I like fought him, like physically, like pushed him on the ground and kicked him a couple of times. Like I had just this pent up like, oh, like I just like wanted to beat things, and I just didn't understand where that came from. And I was also very talkative and very outgoing. So to punish me, they would take recess away from me. And that probably wasn't a great idea, because it probably just made me a little bit more hyperactive. Like there was definitely some attention, hyperactive issues that just weren't acknowledged because my parents had high expectations of me. It was like, yeah, that's not going to be an excuse. And it wasn't so bad that I was like one of the little kids like running around in circles, can't pay attention, but it was definitely more difficult for me to pay attention. And my dad said that I started to get chubby. So in like 3rd grade, he's like seeing his kid with like aggression, like getting chunky, and he's like, oh no, not gonna happen. And like he was like, I can't expect my parents to stop feeding her because they're Italian and German and stuffing my face with cookies and pasta all day. So where he used to go load his truck for the day with what he needed for his pest control business, across the street there was like this elite level cheerleading gym, and then there was like a Taekwondo school. And he was like, well, she's not going to be a cheerleader, so like, you were chunky? Yeah. No, just because he was like not going to cheerleading events, like as a dad, as a spectator, he was like, yep, not going to do that. So he took me in, and I like very specifically remember my first class and my first interaction. I remember like coming home and like just like jumping up on the bed where my mom was sitting and like being like, Mom, look at these moves, and like showing her and everything. And I was so stoked on it. And that was like June of 2000 or maybe 99, either 2000 or 99. And like, I fell in love. Like there was just something about it. I ate it up. I was good at it. Like I thrived. And I had literally been doing it for like 5 months or 4 months or whatever. And in November, they were like, you have to sign her up for a tournament. She's got to go compete. She's got to get this out of her system somehow. Because I was still like kind of crazy. I was like, rah, like all the time, like just excited about it. And I remember I was a yellow belt, which is just starting out. Like you get your white belt and then you do a belt test and you get your yellow belt. And I remember November, I'm at my first tournament and I compete in forms and I get first place. And I remember being moderately satisfied with that. Like I was just like, nah, okay, but sparring. But like that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to spar. Like I was like, I want to fight somebody. But also I was so terrified. I was so freaking nervous. I was in the bleachers crying with my dad, and he's like, do you want to go home? And I was like, no. And he was like, all right, then what are you gonna do? I'm gonna fight. It's gonna be great. Like, and I was like, just that's how, like, just all this nervous energy just it was just spilling out of me. I didn't know what to do. But I remember I was a yellow belt. I got in there. They matched me up with a blue belt who was my age. And I just like, I'll never forget. I was sitting next to her and we're going to fight. And I'm all nervous because blue belt's like 4 or 5 steps up from yellow belt. And I was like, oh God, like she's probably been doing this for a long time. Like, what am I going to do? And she like is talking to me. And I remember she was like, I've been to the Junior Olympics. And I was like, oh shit. And in Taekwondo at that time, it wasn't like a huge deal. Like that's what they called their national level event for kids. They just called it the Junior Olympics. But in my head, I was like, oh my God, she's going to be crazy. And I got in and I beat her. And it was great. And I won a gold medal. And I remember looking at it and wearing 2 gold medals. And I remember she kicked me in the face and I had this bruise on my chin, and I was more proud of the bruise than I was of the gold medals. Like I was so stoked. I was telling my friends and all my teachers, yeah, some girl kicked me in the face, but I still beat her and I won and this and that. And oh my gosh, it was so much fun. And I became just legitimately addicted, and I did not stop for about 15 years. Like did not stop.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's what you mentioned Trish and seeing her in action, and that's what led you into athletic training. And I think that's a perfect segue into athletic training and your new love and how you live your life, and really what's helped you move away from competition and sport, which is a whole nother topic we could do with the 2 of us moving away from sport to new passions. But let's talk about athletic training and what that moment seeing Trish in action did for you as far as sparking your inspiration to put yourself into school, retire essentially, and really create this new outlet. Yeah,
so like I said, I decided when I was about 14 that that's what I wanted to do, and it was kind of watching Trish manage a situation where an athlete got knocked out, and she was just the boss. She was in charge. She knew what to do. She was the only person not freaking out. She was just doing great, and I was thinking, I'm like, man, I could really wrap my head around being in charge of everything. Like, that sounds pretty cool to me. So I got really focused on that and really into it. And throughout high school, I mean, my Taekwondo career wasn't simply going to local events and sparring and things like that. I had a lot of really amazing opportunities to travel the world. I went to Germany twice. I went to Switzerland. I got to train at the Swiss Olympic Training Center. I went to Spain with a U.S. national team. I went to Turkey with the U.S. national team. I've been all over the United States. I know and am more comfortable with a lot of rest areas in Florida than I care to admit because of the amount of driving and travel that we went to. And it was like we went to 15 events a year sometimes, just constantly going. That's why you and I
get along so well with, especially in the beginning of us in my travel schedule still now, is you understand that passion and that traveling is a part of it. And so I think that's really cool. And it's the first time I've ever been in a relationship where that was a commonality, was travel and passion for something that isn't just a 9-to-5, whether that's a passion of yours or not, but like it takes you away from your home.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to travel too. You know, sometimes Josh has these opportunities like, like I have to go to Sydney, or I'm probably going to Chile or whatever. Well, he gets to go to all these places, and I'm like, I would never want him to stay home just to stay home with me.
You're working most of the day anyways.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you go do your thing, I'll travel later. It's fine. But I digress. All of my decisions when I was younger, probably from like the age of 11 to the age of 21, were all centered around Taekwondo. What I ate, what I weighed, what I did in my free time, who I spent time with, how I studied, how I looked. Like, it was all about Taekwondo. Like, that's what it was. And it was all about fighting and how I could be better and what I had to do. And even then, I don't think I put in as much as other athletes did. Like, it was kind of crazy. Even after I graduated high school, I knew I had this amazing scholarship opportunity called Florida Bright Futures, where I maintained over a 3.5 GPA all 4 years of high school. So I had a pretty amazing scholarship where like 100% of my tuition was paid for at any like state or community college, and 75% was paid for at any like state university. So I knew I was just going to go to a state college or community college so I can continue to compete. Like that was the main driving force. And I'm like, it's paid for. Let's do it. I just didn't know where. And I decided on Fort Myers, Florida to train with Toby Oliver at World Championship Taekwondo. And it was one of the best gyms on the East Coast. And I went down there and I had like a very successful 3 years of working for him and teaching martial arts, and it was my whole life, and it was just this perfect opportunity to be able to kind of dive in. And that's when I got to train in Switzerland and compete in Germany and go to Canada and all this really fun stuff and kind of push myself. And then I reached a turning point where I realized I'm either going to have to go to school and become an athletic trainer the way I've always wanted to be, or I'm going to have to put this off and I'm going to keep competing and I'm going to go to the Olympics. Like it was like one or the other. You know, I'm going to make world team or I'm going to go to the Olympics and I'm going to do it. And it took a lot, and it was a lot of soul searching, and it was a lot of considering and a lot of sleepless nights. But I finally decided that I really, really just want to be an athletic trainer. And if I wanted to, I could always get my degree and then go back to competing if that's what I wanted. So I moved from Fort Myers to Orlando, Florida, and started my education at University of Central Florida. Go Knights. And it was amazing. It was everything I could want it to be. And it was as intensive as they had warned me about. I was putting in 40 to 60 hours a week doing internships and volunteer work and being the president of the Student Athletic Training Association and just being as involved as I possibly could. But it was also a huge transformative time, and I don't think I really realized it. Like I moved away. I broke up with a guy that I'd been dating for over 5 years. So since I was like 16, I stopped doing Taekwondo, which I had been doing for more than I hadn't been doing at that time. And
it's always interesting to think of it that way.
Right. And I just didn't give myself time to think about it. Like I just dove into my next thing. And then before I knew it, I was having severe anxiety and not taking care of myself. And of course, it was my first real college experience. Even though I was almost 22, I was partying and I was having a great time. But, you know, partying comes with like not taking very good care of yourself or worrying about your health and your mental health. And I remember reading a quote, and it said, "Every athlete dies twice." And it hit me. And I was like, I never gave myself real time to mourn stepping away from Taekwondo. And I still think about it, and I still kind of get sad.
Of course.
But
like you said, you did it more than you didn't in your time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think still I'm 27, so we're just now getting to the year and a couple of years where I haven't been doing Taekwondo as much as I had. Like I'm still not at that point, and it's been 5 years since I walked away, which is kind of weird to think about. But I'm still involved, and I still do sports medicine coverage for Taekwondo events, and I'm so grateful for the opportunities that it gave me and the people that I met and the lessons that I learned and just what it ingrained into me, the hard work and the travel that I got to do. How many 15-year-olds can say that they've been out of the country multiple times and things like that? And I honestly do think that I think superior is a bad word to use. I definitely don't think I felt superior over anyone, but I was aware that I was actively doing things that other people weren't willing to do.
Superior is a harsh word. You were just conscious.
Yeah,
There's nothing wrong with that. You're just aware, like you said. You were conscious of how you were living your life opposed to the status quo. Mm-hmm. Like you were doing something very significant and very, very different.
Like I was very proud of what I did.
Yeah, of course.
Like I was very
you worked
proud.
Your ass off for it too.
Exactly. Like I was putting in, as a teenager in high school, I would wake up And I would go run 2 miles, and I would rinse off in the shower.
The average person isn't trying to do that.
Like, the average 15-year-old isn't doing that. And I would rinse off in the shower, and I would put on whatever was comfiest, like my everyday, like, wardrobe for high school was probably like sweatpants and a tank top and flip-flops because it was Florida. And I would get back in bed, and I would sleep for 20 minutes, and I'd roll out of bed just in time to barely make it to school in time. And school started at 7:30 or 7:27. It was like a weird number like that. So if you can imagine how early I had to get up for that, it was like rolling out of bed at like 5 and just to get that run in. And then I'd get out of school at 2:45, and I'd come home and I'd have a snack, and then I'd be at the gym at about 4 p.m. and I'd stay there until about 8:30, 9 o'clock every night. And that was my life for years and years.
So let's talk about the transition to North Carolina and working with Trish.
Oh, yeah.
And at the bike park in Holly Springs, North Carolina.
So I graduated from UCF in 2015. And, I mean, like I was saying, I was having some pretty severe anxiety. So that was generally a rougher time in my life. I had stopped exercising as much. I wasn't taking care of myself. I gained a bunch of weight. I went from probably sitting around like 135 to like 150 my first year, and then my second year I'd gotten up to about 160. So moving up to North Carolina, I didn't feel great. I didn't feel like myself. I knew I wanted to get back into some kind of exercise and nutrition, but it was also really hard for me because my sense of food and what was right or wrong or healthy was incredibly warped by weight cutting mentality. And I had also picked up some pretty nasty habits. After I graduated high school, I started controlling my weight with binging and purging and managing my stress with that as well. And I think a few people got suspicious of it, but nobody ever really knew because I just denied it and said, no, that wasn't what I was doing. But I really do think that my coach and my boyfriend at the time, they tried to confront me about it a couple of times, but I just never really gave in. So moving to North Carolina was amazing because I was actually the first person in my graduating class that had a job lined up. So especially because my teachers liked me, like I did well, but my preceptors, which means like the people who were head of my internship, liked me more because I clearly, what would be the word? I prioritized my hands-on learning over my book learning. And I mean, you have to have a balance in the medical field. You have to. Like, I can learn how to do things, but if I can't tell you why I'm doing it or like what every little structure is that I'm touching, it's going to lose its value at a certain point.
And you got people like me asking why.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I do great. So on the hands-on exams, I'd get 98s, I'd get hundreds. I would do really well. And my 98 would literally come from like, oh, you actually like helped the next person that you were a dummy for, like without realizing it. You just like gave them your hand, like where the anatomical structure that was supposed to be like was. So we deducted points off of your test, and I was like, oh, damn it. Like, okay. But then on my written test, I would get like C's, and that was tough because in the athletic training program, you can't get more than 1 C in your 2 years there, or you're placed on academic probation and then eventually asked to leave. So very challenging. I had to kind of like lock it up a little bit. I butted heads with a couple of my teachers quite a bit because I also partied, and I'm pretty sure that they could smell it when I came in during some of the days. And I would never do that going into my internship, but for whatever reason, I felt it was okay to walk into a classroom like visibly hungover, like carrying a large Dunkin' Donuts coffee and a gallon of water with me. But when I moved to North Carolina, I was so stoked because my job was to get my master's degree online while working at Daniel Dare's Action Sports Complex, which was an action sports facility that catered specifically to BMX, but also had opportunities for scooter riders, inline skaters, skateboarders, things like that. And it was just this massive, beautiful facility that I had interned at and volunteered at before. I felt very comfortable, and I definitely found a niche when I was there. I realized I had a really good knack for the emergency care aspect of it, which action sports needs a lot of, dealing with broken jaws, sideways legs, broken ribs, broken collarbones, people just unconscious and seizing and things like that. Like, I react really well under that kind of pressure. And it felt really good to be in a situation where I was doing a lot of emergency care and a lot of manual therapy, which is what I specialized in. So I was just like kind of in my happy place, but also incredibly overworked and, dare I say, underpaid for the amount of hours I was working. I mean, graduate assistants don't really make a lot of money, and it's kind of to be expected, but there was like a lot in that situation.
That's actually going to be an episode of us talking about our own financial journeys and the value we gave and what monetary value we didn't have returned, but also what that drove us to do,
and how harmful it is.
Thankful we are for those experiences.
How harmful it is to your mindset about how much you're actually worth and what the value of it is that you're doing and things like that. So, and that's actually where I met Josh.
So how was, first, just briefly touch upon like BMX specifically, like what was that like coming out of traditional sports? And then, you know, there was a lot of words said to you about me before you met me as a preparation. So like how was that evolution of traditional sports to BMX and action sports, and then, you know, us engaging with one another?
Well, what's funny is that like my background wasn't with traditional sports. So being in Taekwondo, I understood.
Well, I guess that's more of like, I think a more accepted sport than it was in the Olympics. It's been in the Olympics for a while, but like in my mind,
since '88, not long.
Yeah,
and it was only a demonstration sport until 2000.
BMX is 2020. BMX just got in the Olympics for freestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess when you think about it like that, but also like, Taekwondo is never televised, but I remember growing up and watching X Games and seeing Do Tour and seeing skateboarders and BMX riders.
As far as working
have
you had an
action
experience.
Figures and little things like that and posters everywhere. Like, you don't see that in Taekwondo. I remember it was a huge thing because they put our athlete Steven Lopez in like 2000 or 2004. They put him on a McDonald's bag as an Olympic athlete, and that was like that was like, ooh, we made it. Like, here we go. Like, it's happening.
A lot of that with BMX was thanks to Dave.
Yeah.
Dave Mira.
Right.
What was it like, though, firsthand experience and like awareness of seeing that? Because it's different in person. A 6-foot ramp and seeing a person 10 feet above that in person is so different than on TV. Just looking at a ramp is different.
So my first exposure to BMX was actually Recon Tour at the unit in Greenville.
So that was a whole different world.
Right. So it wasn't even like a beginner. Yeah, exactly. Facility. It wasn't even like my first exposure to it wasn't even at the Action Sports Complex. Trish had been telling me for years, because I had been interning with her and volunteering with her since I was 18. So like long before, maybe even 17. I was still in high school when I did my first event with her, and it was always Taekwondo. And she had been telling me, you need to come and check out BMX. And my first reaction was like, no, those bitches are crazy. Like, are you kidding me? Do you see the stuff they do? That would stress me out. I can't handle it. And she would just always respond with like, well, you know, they think you're crazy too, right? Getting kicked in the face. And I was like, we don't try and get kicked in the face. Like, no one does that.
We don't try to hit the ground from 15 feet in the air.
Exactly. But I was just like, no, those fuckers are crazy. Excuse my French. But, so if you don't know what the unit is, I highly suggest that you Google it, and
just Google
hopefully
Ryan Nyquist, the unit.
Yeah, it's the words will never do this place justice. It was one of, and I mean, I can't say that I've seen a whole bunch of skate parks and stuff like that. I've seen photos and everything, but this was one of the most beautiful BMX parks that I had ever seen. Like, just from the color of the wood, the way the unit was written in this like cool chrome label across the top, the size of the ramps, like watching super talented athletes.
Nothing smaller than 6 foot.
Right. Like watching these athletes float around this place. Like, it was incredible. It was just like, what? And I like will never forget I think Kevin Peraza was the first athlete that like I unofficially met other than Daniel Dares. Mm-hmm. And it was really interesting because everything that I'd been told about BMX athletes, like the stereotypes were all right there within the first 10 minutes of me showing up and introducing myself and like being like, okay, like what's going on? So Daniel, and I don't know if he'll be upset with me for saying, but he was hungover or at least sick. Like, I don't know if he was hungover or if he was sick. Yeah. He was like nauseous and unhappy. And I remember this specifically because I had snacks in my bag and I had fruit and I offered him grapes. And he was like, no, but I'll take your banana. And I was like, I didn't offer you my banana. And he took it anyways. And I was like, he loves fine. Yeah, exactly. And Trish was like, you shouldn't have shown him what was in your bag. And I was like, I didn't think that I had to worry about that. And then Kevin was sitting there and he was like smiling and happy. And of course, that's like the Kevin everybody I think like sees. And, you know, and I don't really know him very well still, but he was trying to get out of sweeping and mopping the ramps before the event started. So he was like hiding back with medical, and like Ryan was like, Kevin, like come help. And he was like, no, I'm getting worked on. And Trish was like, no, he's not. Like, it was just like, what is happening? And it was loud and everybody clearly had ADD. And I felt like super overstimulated, but also very excited. And it was one of the coolest things that I've probably ever done still to this day. Like, it's amazing. And I just kind of fell in love with the sport and the athletes. And it honestly, like, if you were a part of my life during that time where I was working at the complex, I probably wasn't the best version of myself, but I can't imagine where I would be if I didn't work at the complex.
Yeah, of course.
Like, if I wasn't doing something that made me so genuinely happy, I can't imagine where I'd be. And like meeting those people and just some of the most like supportive, goofy, difficult people I'd ever met in my life. But it was still like, it was amazing. Something just clicked. I got along well with them. Apparently I work really well with people that have ADD and ADHD, especially when it comes to like making them do very simple, monotonous things. Like I can like put a spin on it that works really well, and that's super helpful. So, and I think I deal well with a little bit of crazy. I think I'm a little bit of crazy. So I think it's almost much more rewarding to me dealing with athletes that have a certain level of craziness.
And that's where you met me.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. What were some of the things you were told about me prior to meeting me, and how was our engagement through, I guess, the first 6 months together? Because that's where I had my surgery, thanks to you. Not in a bad way, but like you pushed me to have the surgery I put off for 2 years. 2.5 years. I remember
Trish told me, she was like, if you aren't in the mood to talk, don't ask Josh any questions. Like, that was like kind of how she worded it. And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, he's a talker. Like, he really loves to talk to people. And she was just like,
super ironic, because when I was a youngin', I was super shy and reserved. And I think it all just started coming out when I got
but she was like,
talking to people.
Don't ask him any questions. And she kind of told me his background story about being a brain tumor survivor and being a very talented athlete and stuff like that. And she kind of told me because she knew he was coming into town the next day, and we were sitting, and I was staying with her at the time. So she's like making dinner, and she's like, oh yeah, by the way, you're going to meet Josh tomorrow and this and that. And she kind of warned me a little bit, and I was like, oh, okay, here we go. And I remember he walked in, and I was like, oh, he's kind of cute, but he's short. Like, that was my first thought process.
Taller than you.
No, I know you're taller than me. But I was just like, oh, and like we met and we talked, and we hit it off right away. Like I didn't ever feel like awkward or uncomfortable around you, but at the same time, I was working. So any athlete that came in, even if they were hitting on me or doing whatever, like I just honestly didn't have time for it. So even if he was trying to flirt with me, like I honestly probably very quickly dismissed it or wasn't having it, because I was like, no, I'm a professional. Like, don't mess with me. That was another thing. Like,
and you had a boyfriend at the time, though. So
not then. I had broken up with somebody when I left Florida.
Yeah, but that's another conversation, I guess.
Yeah.
But shortly after we met, you got into another relationship, and
Right.
so did I, because
Yeah.
I was recently out of a long-term relationship. But
Yeah, I think it's important to point out that like Josh and I were probably good friends for about a year and a half, 2 years before we even like considered
yeah,
seeing each other. And it
Yeah.
was after I moved away from North Carolina back to Florida
so
when that happened.
we talked about, you know, in the last episode of my story, we talked about my journey with ACL and how we clicked over that. So there's no need to go over that. But I want to move into, you know, you did move away once the park lost funding and had to downsize in facility and staff. And
Yeah.
you went back to Florida, took a job. But that was ironically when we started to actually date, flying
Yeah.
back and forth, which was an awesome experience. And I think we can talk about that another time and in more depth. But there's some more key points to wrap this up with I want to bring up, and that was one of the trips that you made back before you actually moved back to North Carolina. We worked on a film called Breaking the Stigma, and I want you to kind of just give a brief just summary, like overview of your perspective of why we filmed that video and what that meant to you and the people that saw it.
Yeah. So like I said, dealing with a lot of anxiety, a lot of weight gain, disordered eating, really strange relationships with food, and not being at my best self while I was living in North Carolina the first time working at the complex. It had a lot to do with my mental health. And I knew it, but I didn't know it. And I was having these like anxiety and panic attacks. And I was maybe not the worst isn't a good word, because I don't look on that time and think like negatively or bad about it anymore. It was just not, I wasn't productive. I wasn't being the best version of myself. That's for sure. I felt like a victim. I felt very out of control of my mental health. I felt like I didn't deserve what I do deserve in a relationship and romantically. I allowed myself to get involved with a couple of narcissistic people that took advantage of me, whether they meant to or not, just because of how I was. And when I moved back to Florida, that was my reset button. And I treated it like that. And I spent a lot of time and a lot of money trying to be by myself and living alone and not relying wholeheartedly on other people to like pull me out of it. And I was like, I'm not going to date anybody serious. Like, it's just going to be me. I'm working on this. I started going to the gym more. I started doing yoga. I started to meditate. I started to realize that what I had been doing to myself wasn't an okay coping mechanism, whether that was like getting involved with people who didn't really deserve my time, whether that was binging and purging, whether that was completely avoiding being alone to not be with my thoughts, or to just watch numerous hours of Netflix or whatever, or movies to just let my brain turn off. Like, it wasn't healthy. So I spent the next year and a half legitimately being alone and being alone with my thoughts and not being afraid of that anymore, and reteaching myself what health was and reteaching myself about food. So I took a lot of advice from Josh and did my own research about food and nutrition and how beneficial that is. And I started to kind of move toward a higher fat diet and lower carb, but I just essentially eliminated like processed foods and a lot of like refined sugars and everything. And I stopped drinking alcohol all the time. Like, I stopped just having alcohol in my house. It was always part of my life. Like, oh, you have beers in your fridge in case a friend's come over. Like, I only drank red wine, but I would always have a bottle of white in case a friend came over and that's what they drank, you know? So
how our society works and conditions us based on nonsense.
My life is, when I think back about my family, my life is centered around food and alcohol. It truly is. And it was never like a negative thing, you know? My grandfather on my mother's
That's
side
not a
was
community aspect. Like,
yeah.
That's like a not stressful, not avoiding your emotions, your
no,
pain,
and no, I never
thoughts.
like when I look back and I think of like family events or family parties, like even people that would like get too drunk, like it was never like like, it wasn't like a regular occurrence or a super negative thing. Like, nobody got like drunk and angry and like broke things or this or that. Like, that was like a really rare thing. And it was like, well, we don't like do with that. And so it was hard to kind of like put it in my head, like, maybe that's something I shouldn't be doing, is constantly worrying about my next meal or having food when someone came to visit. Like, it's okay to not eat. Like, it's 3:00. Like, it's an in-between time. Nobody's eating. You don't need to have snacks for people. You know, so just like little things like that had been ingrained to me for so long. And at this point, Josh and I did that in May of
the Breaking the
2016.
Stigma.
Yeah, Breaking the Stigma video. And it was so...
Was it 2016? No, it was 17. Because I was still competing in 2016. You were still in North Carolina.
That's right. Okay.
It was April or May 2017.
I think we filmed it in April, and then May was Mental Health Awareness Month.
Because my brother and
Maria
were here.
Yeah, Maria and Naya, AJ's wife. Yeah, they were hanging out, and I filmed it, and it was honestly so hard because I had voiced to very few people what I had been experiencing. And I think people were, honestly, when they saw the video, they were shocked. Like, I had a lot of...
Yeah, really positive...
Like, taken aback. Response. Large positive response. People that I loved.
Response.
Like, the Uzzles, Sherry Uzzle, I remember her telling me, I had no idea that you dealt with this. Like, you're, like, so brave and so strong. And I was like, I don't feel brave and strong. I feel like I definitely scrambled my way through that part of my life. Yeah. But, you know, it was amazing to hear this feedback from people, like... Oh my gosh, I deal with the same thing. I go through this. This is how I feel. Even my very best friend at the time, she started going through a lot of anxiety and some health issues and things like that. And just watching her go through it and being able to talk to her about it, it was definitely something that I was like, oh, this is for sure experienced by other people, and I don't feel so alone, and I don't feel so crazy, or I don't feel like maybe there really is something wrong with me when my heart starts to beat really fast. So my whole understanding about doing that video is that I just wanted to help one person. If I could tell my story and let one person know that they're not alone and that they're not crazy, I had reached my goal. And honestly, I'm still so proud of that. Like, it was a good video, and it was definitely like amateur hour, and it could have been better or done more or whatever, but it was perfect for what it was. And I think it had something like 8,000 views, and I don't even know what it's at now. Yeah. When I interviewed for Durham Academy, where I work now, the head of school said that he saw it when he Googled me. And I was like, great. Like, you know, thinking, and he loved it. And said he was really impressed. And I was just shocked. I was like, oh, I forgot people could Google you and find things on the internet. But,
that video meant a lot to me too, because multiple reasons. So I'm all about getting people to share their truth, their story, their message, their purpose, because you and I have very different but similar experiences in life and purposes to help people with different messaging around that. And so I knew it was tough for you, and that's why I was trying to encourage it and make it happen, because sharing that helps so many people, whether understanding you or dealing with their own experience, or not dealing, but like experiencing their own journey with mental health in any aspect. And it was good for me, but then my brother was there, and I remember hearing him giggle and some of the footage in the background of the different stuff that we were joking about, and like his journey with mental health, and so there was a lot of different aspects for me selfishly why I enjoyed making you do that essentially. But I think it brought a lot of light to what the title was, Breaking the Stigma, and it helped a lot of people, whether, like I said, whether they understood you better or they understood what they were going through and that they weren't alone. And that's what we're doing this podcast for, is to let people know they're not alone. And so wrapping up, we wrapped up the last episode of my 3 principles, what I've learned along my 30 years and distilled into my 3 takeaways on life. And they may change, they may be added to or critiqued as we go, or as I go, whatever that looks like. But I always love getting info or insight from other people. And the first thing for me is perspective, and I want to get your perspective on what that means to you and how it's changed from the younger years of your journey to where it is now?
I think the most important thing that I've done, and the most important thing that's helped me live my life in a productive and progressive way, is establishing what I call my core values. And I really do think that they've been apparent through my life, but most apparent in the last few years. Like when I moved to Florida again and I lived alone and I found myself, that's when I wrote these out, and I decided that every decision that I was going to make was going to be about this. Very similar to what I did with Taekwondo. My life was centered. I wanted to win. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to set myself aside from other people. And it was very much about me. Like I liked helping people, and I liked teaching them martial arts, and I liked pushing them to be good. Like I was always the type of person that, like, if I'd move up a step, I'd have my hand out for my teammates to like move up with me, like, come on, like, let's do this. But it was definitely like very much about me. And I think that kind of caught up to me a little bit, because at my core, I very much do believe that I am a healer. Like I am a person that, for whatever reason, like strangers will like open up to me and like tell me all about themselves, and like sometimes it's welcomed and sometimes it's like, no, like like I'm not ready to carry this burden today. But I feel things very strongly, and I feel that my perspective, I'm able to help people, and I've always been able to deliver honesty. I've never been afraid of honesty. That's something that, and I think that that's such an important part of healing and of growing. And then translating to my actual career of being an athletic trainer, my favorite part of being an athletic trainer is treating injuries and helping people feel better, and like helping them understand how to help themselves to feel better, and introducing things like meditation and stretching and exercise into people's lives in a healthy way, and in a way that's not like, oh, just go and like lift a bunch of weights or like do this, and just like, no, it's like find a movement that makes your body happy, and then like let's explore that and let's figure out why. So I'd really think it would be great for me to share what my core values are.
Through them.
So I have these written out, and I have them, it's like one of my only like favorite or like starred photos on my phone. And I wrote these out officially, like it's actually on stationery from when you went to Hawaii the first time with Isaac. From the Kahala Hotel and Resort. It's like on that stationery. I thought it was funny because I had them jotted down in notebooks, but I was like, these all need to be together. Number one is the most wonderful thing in life is to give and receive love. And I think that above all else, if you can love others and you can understand that other people love you, then you're set. Like even through like really negative times, like that's an anchor. Like there are going to be people that love me no matter what, and there are going to be people that I love no matter what. And even if that person maybe doesn't love me back the same way, that's fine. Like I can love you just fine. Even if you just maybe a little bit love me or kind of like me, like I can love people for where they are and who they are in life. Number two, this one was so big for me to learn growing up. It's what other people think about me is none of my business. That's, like that. Yeah, it's huge. Like you can think about me all you want. I can sit here and talk about how I think honesty is healing. And then the next person around the corner, you can talk to somebody that I met in high school when I was 16. They'll be like, oh, Jackie, she was such a bitch. And it's like, well, sometimes, yeah.
I love that like is parallel to that is you're not responsible for what other people think of you or how they feel. Right. Or their actions. But,
you know, I also definitely learned that like there's an art and there's a way to present honesty. That's not just like, hey,
well, it's all context.
Stop it. Yeah.
As long as you're not deliberately trying to cause negativity in someone's life, you're not responsible for how they act, think, or feel.
I just don't think that I had like I didn't have an awareness of how I made other people feel, because I didn't let the way other people, I didn't realize this, but people would say things to me. And if you weren't my coach or my teacher or someone I loved, it did not matter.
Yeah, your perspective was competition and winning.
Exactly. So if you were like, oh yeah, like you should do that, I'd be like, that's great. That's fantastic. You think I'm awful.
Yeah.
That's cool. And I would just like move on. It like didn't faze me. So when I said things to other people and they would get upset, I was like, why is that my responsibility that she's upset? Like, why should I feel bad that that person feels? And I think that's why I didn't have a lot of female friends when I was younger, to be fair.
I love Paige's take on that when she was talking about going to yoga for the first time and how she freaked out. Her teacher came back and apologized, and her teacher said, no, you don't have to apologize. I chose not to let your actions affect me.
Right, exactly.
That's very powerful.
And now I'm just doing that more in a positive way. Number 3 is cultivating and creating happiness is like priority. So after like love and not worrying about other people, I'm just focused on creating my happiness in my life, and finding things that do make me happy and doing more of that and being attracted to that. Like, why I do think that you should do things that you don't want to do sometimes. That's what some hard work is nobody likes like working their ass off all the time, but if the end game makes you happy, then that's what you do. Number 4 is mental, physical, and spiritual self-love leads to mental, physical, and spiritual health and well-being. So like learning to love myself in every aspect. Like I used to be like, oh, like I love my body because of what it can do for me, and I love my personality, but like that's like as far as it went. There wasn't like a deeper connection with self. There wasn't that self-love because it was not unconditional. It was conditional on my success. It was conditional on how I looked. It was conditional on my performance.
It wasn't internal.
Exactly. It wasn't, it was like, if your actions stray from this, like I would love myself less. And I think that that's like harmful. If anybody should have unconditional love for you, it should be you. Put out what you wish to receive. That's huge. That's number 5 for me. Put out what you wish to receive. Like if you don't want people to treat you like an asshole, you probably shouldn't be an asshole to other people. If you want people to have empathy for how you feel when they say things to you, then you should probably do the same. Now, you shouldn't expect people to do that, but know that it'll come back to you in one way or the other. And number 6 is just grow. Learn, just keep growing, do something different. Like whether that's introspective, whether that's sitting down and reading a book, whether that's learning more things about your trade, whether that's going to school or going to school for something else. Like just grow. And those are my core values.
Yeah, I love them.
Thank you.
I think that's a great place to end rather than going into the other 2 questions I had.
Agreed.
I think that's
I don't even know what your questions are.
Well, it's just about my 3 principles, and I just love getting people's perspective on those 3 principles. But you tied into all those. If anything, I would want to just maybe I'll go here. I got two simple questions. You know, because you touched upon perspective, and then you touched upon my number 2, which is health is internal. And my 3 are my principles, my beliefs of life. Yours are your maybe non-negotiables. It's a little similar, but a little bit different. I would have to do some work and thinking to come up with a list like yours. But within that, you touched upon health being internal with what you talked about, your story, mental health, your perspective of your life, who you are, how you show up, and what other people think of you, and how to love yourself. That's all internal. And then, of course, nutrition, exercise.
It goes from in to out for sure.
And that kind of summarizes 100% of what keto has done for you, and you're sharing our sequel we did for Breaking the Stigma, sharing your journey for ketogenic.com, and we're gonna have Brian edit up our style and do some stuff with it. But again, that's you're fulfilling everything you just talked about by doing that and growing and pushing yourself in uncomfortable situations like this. And me kind of forcing you to do this. So even though it was our idea, we've talked about it for a while, months, I think, and now we're actually taking action.
I've avoided it.
But the third principle for me is, our reality is a manifestation of our choices. So I want to get, what is, quickly, what is your perspective on choices, and how does that, what does that word mean to you? We'll just simply leave it there. Like, what does choices, that word, mean for you in your life?
Well, I think that's why it was so important for me to establish that list in my life, because I always knew what was important when I was younger. I had my goals. I had what I was doing. That was what was important to me. But as an adult human, I think it's important and essential to have a very broad understanding of what's essential for your life and what is mandatory for your life. So I think that that's where the first choice comes in, but also knowing intuitively what's a choice and what is just truly inherently what you need in your life, and then making your choices based on those inherent just driving needs. I think that there's a certain divinity in every individual, and that's just who you're born to be. Like, I know things can change based on environment and things that happen in your life, but that's why I call them core values, because they are to my core being and self. Like, that is what is constant, and that's what will always be important to me, no matter what I'm going through or what's happening. I could get in a car accident and lose my legs, and those 6 things will still be what I base all of my choices on. And I think that that's where it comes. Like, if everybody can lay out their values, their essentials, their non-negotiables, their driving force to life, if they can put them on a piece of paper and look at them and say, every choice that I make, every difficult decision that I have, and this is like every little choice, like from how I react to someone cutting me off, to what I'm going to eat that day, to where I'm going to live or what job I'm going to take, like that, those values are what reflects that. And I think that that is going to make you an overall happier person and make you feel just better overall.
Yeah, I think it goes into, being really clear on the life you envision for yourself, and what you believe you deserve. And those non-negotiables are what you deserve, whether it's a loving relationship, it's to grow and learn, it's to do the things you enjoy in your life, and how you want to design your life. I think everyone is has the opportunity to achieve what they desire and what they believe they deserve and what they envision for their life, but it comes back to the belief, and that's up in your head.
I think that's where stress and anxiety and depression come from, is when like you look at, or maybe you don't have them written out on a piece of paper, but you are actively making choices against your core self, who you are to your core. Like I talked about, like mental, physical, internal self-love leading to mental, physical, and external like health and well-being. If I am binging and purging, that is directly going against something that I believe at my core. And it's also going against like giving and receiving love to other people. Like if I'm binging, I'm not taking care of myself. I'm taking food and sustenance away from others and wasting it. It's just, it's inherently going to make me unhappy. And I know that. But you do it, and everybody has their shit that they're working on, and that's fine. But at least like I'm aware of why that makes me so unhappy, and why it makes me so anxious, and why it makes me feel so bad. And it's like, I know that if I make a choice that's against that and against those values, or if I'm in a relationship that's against those, or if I'm having to compromise my values to maintain a friendship or maintain a romantic relationship, like that's why I'm unhappy. And I think that would make a lot of people's understanding, at least, it might not make their choices any easier, but it would make their understanding of why a choice does or doesn't feel good when they make it easier, as if they could set those values out in front of them so that they're tangible and touchable and right in front of your face.
100%. And do you remember that talk Jim Carrey was giving about depression being deep rest from the avatar you're trying to play versus what your internal being really is? And that just
it resonates with me. Absolutely.
Yeah. Joe Rogan and Jim Carrey are our Jesus.
Yes.
I can comfortably say that.
All hail.
So to end it, I have one last question, but there's 3 things I want to bring up that I noted down that you said. And the one thing resonated with me 100% because it's something that you experienced before I did, and that you helped me experience and transition through. And that was the way you worded it, of like you're breaking up with your first love, and in the context of me leaving BMX for a new passion. Although I'm 100% committed and passionate purpose and everything, I love what I'm doing now. there was that identity crisis. And you're mentioning the second thing I wrote down, or the two things I wrote down was, doing, and for you it was Taekwondo, for me it was BMX, doing that particular sport or walk of life more time than you haven't in your life,
right,
is a really profound thing to bring up. And I think that's a perfect topic for another episode that we could talk for hours about.
Yeah.
But that also went with, the every athlete dies twice. And that was also something you helped me with personally, and that I saw with Mira retiring from BMX and then moving on to rally and boxing.
I remember
and
the
triathlons.
first time I said that to you, you were like, Mira said that, and I don't like that.
Yeah. He said that. We'll have to watch that later, his X Games interview, talking about his transition.
I think that there's initially a lot of resistance to that,
when
you hear that, and when you're an elite level athlete and you put your life and soul into something and then you walk away, and it's not necessarily like walking away in a negative way, but you're just, you're stepping down, you're stepping away, you're moving on, it's totally fine, there's no shame in it. But like hearing every athlete dies twice, you're like, oh, that's so negative, like that's so terrible. But I think it's just because society puts like a super negative connotation on death in general. But it doesn't mean that you're any less of a person or that there's less of you. Mm-hmm. I think it's just you're definitely someone new. All your habits are different. Your actions, your choices, everything is different.
We just talked with Todd Mine, my Aussie brother, today about that.
Toddy.
And it makes total sense. And it's interesting because it's a conscious choice that may not be direct. Like for me, it was a lot of different factors I had no control over besides the choice to leave, which was no control over the financial aspect due to a sponsor dropping me. Mm-hmm. The brain tumors coming, which you could be said were a choice my whole life of making choices epigenetically, and genes that were passed down. But it's this subconscious belief of an identity that you're leaving behind, especially for someone like Mira to have that platform in that household name, celebrity status, and all that. He inspired people like myself, where I have him tattooed in the middle of my large back piece, because the life I have now was thanks to him and all he did. So to see that transition, it's this ego-driven protection mode when you do jump out of it. That's what I've gathered. Yeah. It's the ego trying to protect you from something unknown and new, even though it's desirable. It's going to manifest positivity and love. It's just like
something he did
something majority of his life. Like he retired at 39, I believe it was, 38, 39, and then went on to dominate other sports. So it wasn't like he just stopped. He just
he couldn't stand it
to other sports. And that, but that stood out to me. You saying that, especially with what you told me before, which I've written a blog about this. It's gonna be a chapter in my book. Is saying goodbye and breaking up with a first love. Like I think it's really powerful. And what we're doing with these conversations is sharing that perspective. So like what Todd and us were talking about this morning, like so that way athletes aren't single-minded. They're focused. They're. It's like what my dad told me: have a backup plan. It's not really have a backup plan. It's just like explore other aspects of life that you don't know are out there that you may fall in love with. I never thought I'd be in love with speaking and nutrition or going to the gym, So it is what it is. But the third thing I noted that you said quite a bit was values. You have a strong attraction to the word value, and that means a lot to you. And I think that's I know you and I have worked with my mom on these things, non-negotiables, these values for her life and her being, and what was acceptable that she wanted to tolerate. So that's just something too. I think if anyone can really sit down, and one of my exercises, with my clients is really digging deep of like what their life means to them, what their goals mean, why they want to do this and that, what their goals looks like for their life, but really sitting down like you said you did by yourself, and like, how do I want to be treated? How do I want to treat others? How do I want to show up? How do I want to treat my body? Yeah. What do I want to do? What do I not want to do? Where do I like?
And when I say I sit down and did this was a year.
Yeah, it wasn't just
like
overnight.
This wasn't like I sat down and I wrote some shit out and I felt better. Like this was like painful and tears and resistance and
you helped me with this.
More disordered eating and more drinking and this and that. Yeah, and just like
getting me to really determine my worth and what I enjoyed about myself.
He couldn't write out 5 things that he physically liked about himself.
Yeah, and that's tough. But
that was just making people do things like just do uncomfortable shit. Like, and I promise you'll grow. Just do uncomfortable shit all the time. Like do weird existential uncomfortable shit all the time.
And that's a part of what makes me feel alive is growth and challenging myself, learning more, but doing uncomfortable things and becoming comfortable with it. And so to wrap this up, the last thing I wanted to ask was, what's next?
Oh, that's the best part. I don't know. Like right now, I've worked my ass off for so long. I've honestly, like, all I think back and I just remember, oh, I'm training for this. Oh, I'm getting ready for this. Oh, I'm prepping for this. Oh, I'm getting my black belt. Oh, and it's just, oh, I'm going to school, and I finally am at a job that I love. I'm in an amazing romantic relationship where I feel safe and stable and secure and valued. And I'm taking my friend Michael Reyes, I'm taking his advice from a tarot reading that we did. And he told me, like, enjoy the fruits of your labor, my friend. Like, stop thinking about what's going on next, what's happening next, and just enjoy what's going on. Like, I have vague ideas, and I definitely have dreams and things like that. And there are things that I'm personally working on myself. But as far as the overall majority of my life, my goal right now is to just enjoy the hell out of it and to absorb every ounce of it that I can and pay attention.
Yeah, I love it. Perfect place to stop. So
agreed.
If you've all made it this far, again, as always, we appreciate your time. We appreciate your ears. We appreciate you supporting us. And
thanks for listening to me.
Yeah, reach out if you want to know more about anything we talked about with Jackie. If you want to know anything more about any of the topics we covered, if there's anything we can do to provide you more value, let us know how well Jackie did with sharing her story. She wasn't confident in doing this.
Or not. You don't have to say anything.
She led the way. So, we want to thank you guys again. We love you. We're here to support you. And I'm your host, Josh Perry.
And I'm Jackie Lauricella, and I'm feeling pretty grateful. So thank you guys.
Yeah, this is the Great Matters podcast. We appreciate you guys, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Signing out.
Totally.